आसीद् राजा सार्वभौमः शूरसेनेषु वै नृप चित्रकेतुर् इति ख्यातो यस्यासीत् कामधुन् मही. O King Parikshit, in the province of Shurasena, there was a king named Citraketu who ruled the entire earth. During his reign, the earth produced all the necessities of life. Here, the most significant statement is that the earth completely produced all the necessities of life during the time of King Citraketu. Isha Upanishad says, Isha vasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita madrida kasya svidhanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota. And one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. Very difficult to understand. We think those things necessary for himself, we'll say, okay, all of this is necessary for us, which are set aside as his quota. This we can understand by whatever things we get very easily in our life is what is set aside as our quota. Prabhupada writes elsewhere saying that, if you try to acquire something which is actually doesn't rightfully belong to you, even though you may get it, you will still lose it. And so then there is so much of anxiety in getting and losing it. So one should not accept things which knowingly well that they don't belong to us. We should not accept. So previously, Varnashrama used to guide the society in this way. So everybody knew what they're entitled for, and that's it. There's no constant effort to accumulate newer and newer things. Whatever was there, and people used to be just satisfied with what they've got and go on with their duties and also performing devotion. But the Kali Yuga society is it's demoniac because it just doesn't follow the system of Krishna. All greedy, which are the demoniac characteristics which Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, the 16th chapter. Right? So this, going after more and more and more doesn't belong to the more cultured human beings. But that's what it is. So we have to still purify ourselves, purify the whole world by distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. There's no other way. You distribute books, and today I'm seeing even with the distribution of books, there is very little effort to make people read because people don't just read these books, and even if they read, they won't understand. We know many people who just take books and then return, not directly to us, but to some second shop. In near Malleshwaram, there's one second shop where used books are sold. Sometimes we see Bhagavad Gita and all, and we get pained, saying that somebody took the Bhagavatam. Krishna came to their house and then they sent him away because we didn't talk to those devotees who bought them. Right? We just simply distributed. So distribution is one thing, but actually making the effort to connect with them, helping them read, helping them understand the importance of these, that is important. So book distribution is not about selling books. It's about convincing people that they need this knowledge. So it's an effort. So we might go behind numbers, but we should also try to put effort to make sure that they read. Maybe, contact should be taken, some reading group should be created. Some effort has to go in to help them read as well. So otherwise, the demoniac condition of the society will, of course, Prabhupada's books are all time bombs. So, if not today, someday it is going to explode. But we also see of, people who have not been able to understand the importance of these books and have also given them away. So effort is required. Krishna, the Supreme Controller, has created the material world which is completely perfect and free from scarcity. See, the material world is free from scarcity. But why scarcity? Why there is scarcity? Because there are artificial boundaries drawn by man. It's not by nature. Artificial boundaries have been drawn by man. My country, my place, uh, like this. Hmm. The Lord supplies the necessities of all living entities. These necessities come from the earth, and thus the earth is the source of supply. When there is a good ruler, the source produces the necessities of life abundantly. So previously, this was the understanding that if there's a good ruler, like Rama Raja, because Rama was such a great king, that everything was available abundantly. In fact, even during the Krishna's presence, right? So we know of that Brahmana who came to the Yadu assembly and said, because of some mistake by the ruler, I'm untimely losing my children. Even that was considered as the mistake of the king. If such unexpected or abnormal things happen. However, when there's not such a good ruler, there will be scarcity. This is the significance of the word kamadhuk. Now, how can we understand this? That how is it dependent on the ruler? What is the role of a kshatriya? The role of a kshatriya is to enable all the living entities, especially human beings, to do their dharma, to follow their dharma. That is the role of the kshatriya, to provide facilities for them to follow dharma. So when that is done, automatically people will live a religious life, and then they will do their duties. And by doing their duties, their material necessities will be taken care of. So the ruler, by not encouraging, providing facilities for people to follow their dharma, will be indirectly responsible for their suffering, and that is why he also gets a part of the suffering. So it's dangerous to be in politics, because if we don't set the right environment, if we don't create the right environment, then we are affected. This is the significance of the word kamaduk. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said kamam avarsha parjanya sarva kamadugamahi. Prabhupada used to quote this kamam avarsha parjanya. During the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthir, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of men in profusion, in excess. We have experienced that in some seasons the rains produce abundance, and in other seasons there is scarcity. We have no control over the earth's productiveness, but it is naturally under the full control of the Supreme Lord. By his order, the Lord can make the earth produce sufficiently or insufficiently. If a pious king rules the earth according to the Shastric injunctions, there will naturally be regular rainfall and sufficient produce to provide for all men. There will be no question of exploitation, but everyone will have enough. Black marketeering and other corrupt dealings will then automatically stop. This is all dependent on the ruler. Simply ruling the land cannot solve man's problems unless the leader has spiritual capabilities. He must be like Maharaja Yudhishthira, Parikshit Maharaja Ramachandra. Then all the inhabitants of the land will be extremely happy. And so Prabhupada also tried to take his books to the leaders. Unfortunately, there wasn't much acceptance. So those who have influence, they should try to at least gift books, make these leaders, hear the instructions from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Tasya bharya sahasranam sahasrani dashabhavan tantani kaschapi nripo nalebhetasu santatim. This Citraketu had 10 million wives. Wow. But although he was capable of producing children, he did not receive a child from any of them. By chance, meaning by providence. All the wives were barren. Rupaudaryayo janma vidyaishwarya shriyadibihi sampannasya gunai sarvais chintavandhyapaterabhut. Citraketu, the husband of these millions of wives, was endowed with a beautiful form, magnanimity, and youth. He was born in a high family, he had a complete education, and he was wealthy and opulent. Nevertheless, in spite of being endowed with all these assets, he was full of anxiety because he did not have a son. It appears that the king first married one wife, but she could not bear a child. Then he married a second, a third, a fourth, and so on, but none of the wives could bear children. In spite of the material assets of Janma Aishwarya Sruta Shri, Shruta, Janma Aishwarya Shruta Shri. So good birth, wealth, good education, and beauty. Hmm. So birth in aristocratic family with full opulence, wealth, education, and beauty. He was very much aggrieved because in spite of having so many wives, he had no son. Certainly his grief was natural. Grihastha life does not mean having a wife and no children. Chanakya Pandita says, Putrahinam griham shunyam. Of course, here there is emphasis on son. If a family has no son, his home is no better than a desert. Putra. Putra means punnama naraka trayate iti putraha. There is one naraka by name Punna. Punnama. So a son will deliver the parents from that naraka called Pun. That is a putra. Of course, devotees don't have to worry about all these things. But if they're non-devotees, then they have to be worried. Especially in Kali Yuga, because they'll do things which might take them to hell and then there is nobody to rescue them. That is the whole idea of putra. The king was certainly most unhappy that he could not get a son, and this is why he had married so many times. Kshatriyas especially are allowed to marry more than one wife, and this king did so. Nevertheless, he had no issue. He had no children. न तस्य सम्पदः सर्वा महिष्यो वामलोचनाः सार्वभौमस्य भूश्चेयन् चेयम् अभवन् प्रीतिहेतवः. His queens all had beautiful faces and attractive eyes, yet neither his opulences, his hundreds and thousands of queens, nor the lands of which he was the supreme proprietor were sources of happiness for him. So wealth, position, money, etc., etc., is not the source of happiness. So people like this, they'll have some material requirement, like this king wanted a son, and whatever they have is not going to give them happiness because they're looking for something. They have some expectations out of this world, and when we have expectations out of this world, material expectations, then we're not going to be happy. तस्यैकदा तु भवनम् अङ्गीरा भगवान् ऋषिः लोकान् अनुचरन् एतान् उपागच्छत् यदृच्छया. Once upon a time, when the powerful sage named Angira was traveling all over the universe without engagement. Without engagement means not that he didn't have work. He didn't have any specific work like grihasthas, like 10 to 8, 10 to 6, 10 to 8 kind of work. By his sweet will, he came to the palace of King Citraketu. Tam pujayitva vidhivat pratyuthanarhanadibhihi kritatityam upasidat sukhasinam samahitaha. Citraketu immediately stood up from his throne and offered him worship. He offered drinking water and eatables and in this way performed his duty as a host to a great guest. When the rishi was seated very comfortably, the king, restraining his mind and senses, sat on the ground at the side of the rishi's feet. See, this is very important. Prabhupada has not written a purport, but when I read this, the thought that comes to my mind is when we are in the midst of exalted personalities, especially Vaishnavas, we have to restrain our mind and senses. Otherwise, they will just speak some nonsense, do some unnecessary things. So restraining, understanding that there is a superior personality, in their presence we are there, we have to be controlled. So he sat on the ground at the side of the rishi's feet, though he was the emperor. Maharshistamupasinam prashrayavanatam kshitau pratipujya maharaja samabhashyedam abravit. O King Parikshit, when Citraketu bent low in humility, was seated at the lotus feet of the great sage, the sage congratulated him for his humility and hospitality. The sage addressed him in the following words. So this is very, very important. And we talked about this. This humility should not be external. The humility has to be internal. So he was very pleased. Angira uvacha api te namayan swasti prakritinam tathatmanah yatha prakritibir guptaha puman rajas cha saptabihi. The great sage Angira said, My dear king, I hope that your body and mind and your royal associates and paraphernalia are well. And the seven properties of material nature, which are the total material energy, ego, five objects of sense gratification. When all these are in proper order, the living entity within the material elements is happy. Without these seven elements, one cannot exist. Similarly, a king is always protected by seven elements: his instructor, Swami or Guru, his ministers, kingdom, fort, treasury, royal order, and friends. So Angira is asking if all of them are in order. Are all of them in order? Because if they're all in order, order meaning as required, then there's no need. Then a person will be happy. As it is quoted by Sridhar Swami in Bhagavatam commentary. Swamyamatyau janapada durgadravina sanchayaha dando mitram cha tasyaitaha sapta prakrtayo mataha. A king is not alone. He first has his spiritual master, the supreme guide. Then come his ministers, his kingdom, fortifications, treasury, system of law and order, and his friends or allies. If these seven are properly maintained, the king is happy. Similarly, as explained in Bhagavad Gita, the living entity, the soul, is within the material covering of the Mahat Tattva, ego, and Pancha Tanmatra, five sense objects. When these seven are in proper order, the living entity is in a mood of pleasure. Covering of the Mahat Tattva, which is the body, senses, ego, and the objects of senses. If these seven are in proper order, the living entity is in a mood of pleasure. Generally, when the associates of the king are quiet and obedient, the king can be happy. Therefore, the great sage Angira inquired about the king's personal health and the good fortune of his seven associates. So both he is asking, king's personal health and the good fortune of his seven associates. When he inquired from a friend whether everything is well, we are concerned not only with his personal self, but also with his family, source of income, assistants, or servants. All of them must be well, and then a person can be happy. So see how difficult it is for a human, for a grihastha to be happy. His own personal self, family, source of income, assistants, servants, all of them have to be happy. All of them must be well. Well means what? Happy. Then he can be happy. So we can understand how difficult it is to find material happiness. Atmanam prakritish-vaddha nidhaya shreya apnuyat ragna tatha prakritayo naradeva hitadhayaha. O king, O Lord of humanity, when a king directly depends upon his associates and follows their instructions, he is happy. Similarly, when his associates offer their gifts and activities to the king and follow his orders, they are also happy. So they mutually they have to help each other. The actual happiness of a king and his dependents is described in this verse. King should not simply give orders to his dependents because he is supreme. Sometimes he must follow their instructions. Similarly, dependents should depend on the king. Mutual dependence will make everyone happy. Apidara prajamatya vrityaश्रेण्योऽथ mantrinaha paura janapada bhupa atmaja vashavartinaha. O king, are your wives, citizens, secretaries, and servants, and the merchants who sell spices and oil under your control? See, all these have to be under the control. Are you also in full control of ministers, the inhabitants of your palace, your provincial governors, your sons, and your other dependents? The master or king and his subordinate should be interdependent. Through cooperation, both of them can be happy. That was said in the previous verse. And in this verse specifically, Angira is saying that you should have them under control, which is also important. Yasyatmanuvashas chet syat sarve tadvashaga ime loka sapala yachanti sarve balimatandritaha. The king's mind is fully controlled. All his family members and governmental officers are subordinate to him. His provincial governors present taxes on time without resistance, and what to speak of lesser servants. The king's mind is fully controlled. So Angira Rishi is asking king whether his mind was also under control. This is most essential for happiness. We discussed this multiple times. So mind, it's all our mind. It's all in our mind. So if the mind is under control, then person is happy, irrespective of what situation he is in. But because Krishna talks about this extensively in the 6th chapter, Uddharedatmanatmanam atmanam bhavasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva hi ripuratmanaha atmaiva eva atmaro. So the mind is the biggest enemy and also the biggest and also the best friend. But what mind is the enemy is uncontrolled mind is the enemy. Controlled mind is the friend. And Prabhupada in that purport writes saying that one has to control their mind from sense objects. But how can we control our mind from sense objects? Because our mind is naturally driven towards sense objects because we want sense gratification. So the only reason or only solution for this is to be attracted by Krishna, to be attracted towards Krishna. Only then the mind can be naturally, it can go towards Krishna. And when the mind is attracted by Krishna, it will slowly and steadily cease to get attracted from material things. Material attraction will reduce and then stop. But if there is no attraction of Krishna, then just artificial sense control is not going to work. Atmana priyate natma paratah svata eva va lakshaye labdha kamam tvam chintaya shabalam mukham. Oh, King Citraketu, I can observe that your mind is not pleased. Because mind has three things: thinking, feeling, and willing. So it's not feeling good. You seem not to have achieved your desired goal. Is this because of you yourself or it has been caused by others? Your pale face reflects your deep anxiety. And we can actually see this. Most people in the world, when we see people, their faces are pale. It's very clear that they're full of anxiety. Yesterday, day before, I was in a metro and then I was seeing that either people are worried or people are sleepy. Maybe they are overworked. They don't have time for themselves. Maybe they have too many problems. And when we look at the faces of others, we feel like, oh, sad. And then there are others who are completely carefree. Maybe they're in the lower modes. They are just, happy seeing some. Everybody is in front of their mobile, right? They have earplugs or whatever, earphones and mobiles, and some people are in their own world, which they think is very sweet. One sweet world, but it's not so sweet after all. Then others are in anxiety. So at the end of the day, everybody is suffering. The only solution to the suffering humanity is Krishna consciousness. That's why Prabhupada says Bhagavatam is for re-spiritualization of this civilization. So books have to be distributed. एवं विकल्पितो राजन् विदुषामन् मुनिनापि सह प्रश्रयावनतो भुवाभ्याः prajakamasthato munim. Shukadeva Goswami said, O King Parishit, although the great sage Angira knew everything, he inquired from the king in this way. Thus King Chitraketu, desiring a son, bent low in great humility and spoke to the great sage as follows. When the face is the index of the mind, a saintly person can study the condition of one's mind by seeing his face. When Angira Rishi remarked about the king's discolored face, King Chitraketu explained the cause of his anxiety as follows. Chitraketuruvacha Bhagavan kim na viditam tapojnana samadhibihi yoginam dhvastapapanam bahirantah sharirishu. King Chitraketu said, O great Lord Angira, because of austerity, knowledge, and transcendental samadhi, you are freed from all reactions of sinful life. Therefore, as a perfect yogi, you can understand everything external and internal regarding embodied conditioned souls like us. So austerity, knowledge, and transcendental samadhi. So very advanced soul is freed from all reactions of sinful life. A perfect yogi, so he can understand everything, external and internal, about conditioned souls like us. And this we've seen in the life of Srila Prabhupada and even many great Vaishnavas also. They know, they see through us, they can see through us, they can understand what's going on in our mind. And they'll tell things appropriately. Then we'll be surprised saying, oh, how did he come to know what's going on in my mind? Because they are such exalted souls, so they can understand. तथापि पृच्छतो भ्रूयां ब्रह्मन्नात्मनि चिन्तितं भवतो विदुषश्चापि चोदितस्त्वदनुज्ञयाम्. O great soul, you are aware of everything, yet you are asking me why I am full of anxiety. Therefore, in response to your order, let me disclose the cause. He didn't speak like order, but for king, he is taking it as an order. This is how we have to take the instructions or statements of our gurus. When guru speaks, then we should take it as an order, not as a suggestion or an option. लोकपालैरपि प्रार्थ्याः साम्राज्यैश्वर्यसम्पदः न नन्दयन्त्यप्रजं मां क्षुत्रत्कामम् इवापरे. As a person aggrieved by hunger and thirst is not pleased by the external gratification of flower garlands or sandalwood pulp. One who is aggrieved by hunger and thirst. You give him flower garland, sandalwood pulp, what is the use? Like that, I'm not pleased with my empire, opulence, or possessions which are desirable, even for great demigods, because I have no son. So the reason he clearly discloses, is not beating around the bush, came to the point directly, given an order, took the order, very clearly just said, I have no son, so I'm depressed, I'm sad. ततः पाहि महाभाग पूर्वैः सह गतं तमः यथा तरेम दुष्पारं प्रजया तद्विदेहि विधेहिम्नः. Therefore, O great sage, please save me and my forefathers who are descending to the darkness of hell because I have no progeny. Kindly do something so that I may have a son to deliver us from hellish conditions. According to Vedic civilization, one gets married simply to have a son who is needed to offer oblations to his forefathers. King Citraketu responsibly desired to beget a child so that he and his forefathers might be delivered from the darkest regions. He was concerned with how to get pinda, oblations, in the next life, not only for himself but also for his forefathers. Therefore, he requested Angira Rishi to favor him by doing something that could help him get a son. So, more dharmic reason why he wanted to have a son, not for some sense gratification. Yeah, so he's saying, otherwise my forefathers will also suffer because of me. So, if there is any way, please help me. Of course, we know from the history of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, we don't have to worry about this as devotees. 7 generations into 3 lifetimes are all going to be liberated. So by just becoming a pure devotee. So our focus has to be just to become pure devotee and not worry about whether we have a son or not or whatever. Right? We don't have to worry about all that. Just focus on devotion. Whatever Krishna has given, just accept it as your life and be satisfied with it. Yeah, and Citraketu will subsequently come to that state. He'll say, maybe I should not, no son is better than a bad son. So we should always understand, saying that, it's whatever has come is Krishna's mercy and just accept it and move on. But of course, that is because we are devotees. Chitraketu was also a devotee, but because he was in the position of a king, he had to show the path. Mahajanayana gatasya panta. So he wanted to show people in general, saying that, if you are married and you should have a son, because that's Vedic civilization. श्रीशुकोवाच इत्यर्थितः स भगवान् कृपालुर्ब्रह्मणः सुतः श्रपयित्वा चरुं त्वाष्ट्राम् ayajad vibhuhu. In response to the request of Maharaj Citraketu, Angira Rishi was born of Lord Brahma's mind was very merciful toward him. Because the sage was a great powerful personality, he performed a sacrifice by offering oblations of sweet rice to Twasta. Mm. So he did some, he offered oblations to this Rishi, Twasta. ज्येष्ठा श्रेष्ठा च या राज्ञो महिषीणां च भारत नाम्ना कृतद्युतिस्तस्यै यज्ञोच्छिष्टं वदाद्विजः. O Parikshit Maharaj, best of the Bharatas, the remnants of the food offered in the yagna were given by the great sage Angira to the first and most perfect among Chitraketu's millions of queens, whose name was Kritadyuti. अथाह नृपतिं राजन् भवितैकस्तवात्मजः हर्षशोकप्रदस्तुभ्याम् इति ब्रह्मसुतो ययौ. Thereafter the great sage told the king, O great king, now you will have a son who will be the cause of both harsha and shoka, jubilation and lamentation. The sage then left without waiting for Chitraketu's response. The word harsha means jubilation and shoka means lamentation. The king was overwhelmed with joy when he understood that he would have a son. Because of his great jubilation, he could not actually understand the statement of King Angira. He accepted it to mean that there would certainly be jubilation because of the birth of his future son, but that he would be the king's only son and being very proud of his great wealth and empire would not be very obedient to his father. So the king thought that the reason for his shoka would be that he will be a misbehaved child. Thus the king was satisfied, thinking, let there be a son, it does not matter if he is not very obedient. In Bengal, there's a proverb that instead of having no maternal uncle, it's better to have a maternal uncle who is blind. The king accepted this philosophy, thinking that a disobedient son would be better than no son at all. The great sage Chanakya Pandita says, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned scholar nor a devotee? Such a son is like a blind, diseased eyes which causes only suffering. Nevertheless, the material world is so polluted that one wants to have a son even though he is useless. Who is a useless son? Is one who is not learned, nor is he a devotee. He is a useless son. This attitude was represented in the history of King Citraketu. सापि तत्प्राशनाद् एव चित्रकेतुरधारयत् गर्भं कृतद्युतेर्देवी कृत्तिकाग्नेरिवात्मजम्. As Krittika Devi, after receiving the semen of Lord Shiva from Agni, conceived a child named Skanda or Kartikeya. Kritadyuti, having received semen from Chitraketu, became pregnant after eating the remnants of food from the yagna performed by Angira. Tasya anudinam garbha shuklapaksha ivodupah vavruddhe shurasenesha tejasa shanakairnripa. After receiving semen from Maharaj Chitraketu, the king of Shurasena, the queen Kritadyuti gradually developed in her pregnancy, just as the moon develops during the bright fortnight. अथ काल उपावृत्ते कुमारः समजायत जनयन् शूरसेनानां शृण्वतां परमां mudam. Course of time a son was born. Hearing the news of this, all inhabitants of the state of Shurasena were extremely pleased. King Chitraketu was especially pleased after purifying himself by bathing and by decorating himself with ornaments. He engaged learned brahmanas in offering benedictions to the child and performing the birth ceremony. And to the brahmanas who took part in the ritualistic ceremony, the king gave charity of gold, silver, garments, ornaments, villages, horses, and elephants, as well as 60 crores of cows. Wow. As a cloud indiscriminately pours water on the earth, the beneficent King Chitraketu, to increase the reputation, opulence, and longevity of his son, distributed like rainfall all desirable things to everyone. So it can be understood by such charity. Some things like this can happen. Increased reputation, opulence, longevity. When a poor man gets some money after great difficulty, his affection for the money increases daily. Similarly, when King Chitraketu, after great difficulty, received a son, his affection for the son increased day after day. The mother's attraction and attention to the son, like that of the child's father, excessively increased. The other wives, seeing Kritadyuti's son were very much agitated, envy. as if by high fevers with a desire to have sons. So they became envious of Kritadyuti. As King Citraketu fostered his son very carefully, his affection for Queen Kritadyuti increased, but gradually he lost affection for the other wives who had no sons. So the other queens were extremely unhappy due to their being sonless. Because the king's negligence towards them, they condemned themselves in envy and lamented. A wife who has no sons is neglected at home by her husband and dishonored by her co-wives, exactly like a maid servant. Certainly, such a woman is condemned in every respect because of her sinful life. So, if they don't have children, it's because of sinful life. You can understand. So, a person who has no mother at home and whose wife does not speak sweetly. uh, okay, everybody can pack up. Whose wife does not speak sweetly should go to the forest. For such a person, living at home and living in the forest are equal. Similarly, for a woman who has no son, who is not cared for by her husband, and whose co-wives neglect her, treating her like a maidservant, uh, to go to the forest is better than to remain at home. Mm. Okay, so husband has to care for the wife, wife has to speak sweetly. Both are required. Even maid servants who are constantly engaged in rendering service to the husband are honored by the husband, and thus they have nothing for which to lament. Our position, however, is that we are maid servants of the maid servant. Therefore, we are most unfortunate. So this is what they are thinking, saying that a hopeless situation. So they become envious. Being neglected by their husband and seeing Kritadyuti's opulence in possessing a son, Kritadyuti's co-wives always burned in envy, which became extremely strong. So this is important, we keep on thinking about something like this, then it becomes very strong and we end up doing some nonsense. As their envy increased, they lost their intelligence. Being extremely hard-hearted and unable to tolerate the king's neglect, they finally administered poison to the son. Unaware of the poison administered by her co-wives, Queen Kritadyuti walked within the house, thinking that her son was sleeping deeply. She did not understand that he was dead. Thinking that her child had been sleeping for a long time, she was certainly very intelligent, ordered the nurse, "My dear friend, please bring my son here." When the maidservant approached the child who was lying down, she saw that his eyes were turned upward. There were no signs of life, all his senses having stopped, and so she could understand that the child was dead. Seeing this, she immediately cried, "Now I am doomed," and fell to the ground. Hatasmi. They were also attached to the child, that the maid servant herself is thinking, "I am doomed." In great agitation, the maid servant struck her breast with both hands and cried loudly in regretful words. Hearing her loud voice, the queen immediately came, and when she approached her son, she saw that he was suddenly dead. In great lamentation, her hair and dress in disarray, the queen fell to the ground unconscious. O King Parikshit, hearing the loud crying, all the inhabitants of the palace came, both men and women. Being equally aggrieved, they also began to cry. The queens who had administered the poison also cried pretentiously, knowing full well their offense. When King Chitraketu heard of his son's death from unknown causes, he became almost blind. Because of his great affection for his son, his lamentation grew like a blazing fire, and as he went to see the dead child, he kept slipping and falling on the ground. Surrounded by his ministers and other officers and the learned Brahmanas present, the king approached and fell unconscious at the child's feet, his hair and dress scattered. When the king, breathing heavily, regained consciousness, his eyes were tearful and he could not speak. Okay, so we will continue from here tomorrow. Krishna willing, we will stop here. Any comments? Any thoughts? It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too much to discuss, but yeah, some significant points are about um, envy. About envy, then how strict dharma is, how strict the rules of Krishna. They're all very strict. So We could have done things so wrong that we might become adharmic by just not having a son like this. We can see in modern, mm, so many parents, they don't have sons. Clearly so shows that sinful. Not having children is even one more level. But so we can just by that understand how intricate the rules of dharma. So you can't be just carefree. Which is why yesterday also I was saying, even though we are devotees, we should try to make sure that our actions, that we are responsible for our actions, we understand what is right, what is wrong. In the name of devotion, also, we should not hurt people. We should not be cruel to people. That is why one of the anarthas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, is jiva himsa. So we should not be, violent, cruel towards any kind, any jiva. So we have to be very, very careful. Because all these have sinful reactions, and then that's the reason why we are all suffering with so many different problems. So do bhakti and also be responsible in life. Understand based on Guru Sadhu Shastra what is right, what is wrong. Don't go by just whimsical thought process, because if it is wrong, then it will be cause of suffering. And for devotees, situation is different. Of course, if we are ignorantly doing something, then Krishna might still pardon us, but we should try to make sure that we're not doing wrong things. So that's also important. Yeah, and envy. We should never envious. We be envious. We should just be happy with whatever Krishna has given and just go on with our material duties, spiritual duties, seva. Mm, Yeah, these are few things from today's reading. Any other observations from anybody you can share?
Pranam Prabhuji,
Yeah,
just
Mother.
wanted to share the condition of the present day society. Like I'm
Uh-huh.
hearing, first of all, the young generation is not ready to marry, and if at
Mm.
all they get married, they are saying we don't want children. Like
Oh, okay.
so demoniac. Like I'm
Mm.
hearing few cases here, and like it is
Mm-hmm.
very shocking and further
Oh,
degradation of the
okay,
society.
okay, okay. Thank you, Mataji.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's another, uh, maybe new trend. Mm, mm,
Yes, Prabhuji, I've heard like two, three couples they got married and now they are like, we don't want children. It's bad.
yeah, actually, that's true. My daughter works for a company, and mm, the owners of the company, they decided not to have children because they wanted to be career oriented. Yeah, true. Yeah, demoniac society. They don't even know what the institution of marriage is meant for. Yeah. Yeah, so somehow or the other, we have to give mercy to all these people. There's no other way. Hmm.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Mataji.
So, Prabhu, the feeling of getting neglected,
Hmm.
it is the main cause of, doing, going
Yeah.
blind,
Hmm.
getting envious, and, then
Hmm.
creating
Yeah,
things
yeah.
which you don't. So, even in our lives, we should see that, if somebody is neglected,
Mhm.
we should, in spiritual life or in
Yeah.
material life,
Yeah.
I mean, when a person is cornered and a person goes through this, it's very, very deep
Yeah.
level, Prabhu.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, this is a good point. Actually, see, two things we can think of in this situation, right? See, one is while we might. So, yeah, generally the situation, especially in devotees' houses, are that one devotee is advanced and the other is not. Right, for whatever reason. Now we've seen many houses, one husband or wife is more advanced than the other, and then they become like hard-hearted towards the other person. Now, which is why I was saying, this is jiva himsa. So we have to understand that the other jiva, right? And it could be parents, it could be anybody, right? They might not be able to come to this stage, but unless we are compassionate towards them and help them on the path, and just we can't become like it can't be like a military regime. For example, I know that like my mother is not as Krishna conscious as I want her to be, but then I realized that for a long time I used to be like a tyrant, like, you have to do this, you have to do this. Now I realize saying that, in spite of all my effort, she's not going to get there because of her own progress in her journey in her life, that she is not there, right? She is at a lower level of consciousness, and she might require more lifetimes. And now, at least I become a little bit more compassionate to just encourage her to do as much as she's able to do. And at least let her be favorable towards Krishna consciousness. Let her chant, let her read, but that's all she can do. If I'm expecting my mother to be 24 hours Krishna consciousness, she is not there, right? So, and yeah, this experience, then she felt that, that there's too much being expected from her, etc., etc. And then I was able to, thankfully, by Guru and Krishna's mercy, recognize that, and mm, yeah, doing some things to encourage her, but at the same time, understanding that she has limitations, that she's not going to get much beyond where she is at her age. And it could be true for others as well. So we have to see, that is why this being compassionate is very important. Compassionate doesn't mean letting people do whatever they do, but at the same time being realistic about their situation and helping them along is very, very important. I mean, many a times in my own life, I've had situations where I could not actually follow the instructions of my guru. And when I went to my Guru Maharaj and spoke to him, he was not at all hard on me. He directly understood my situation. At one time I had moved from Bangalore to go to Gujarat for taking up some service of Maharaj's books production, but I couldn't because of my family constraints. My daughter and my mother could not deal with it. The environment, etc., etc. So many issues were there. So I went and spoke to him directly, saying that, Guru Maharaj, this is my condition. I'm not able to. He very directly said, it's okay. Nowadays, everything can be managed remotely. So it's okay. You can see if you can continue to contribute from where you are in Bangalore, like that. So though on the Vyasasan, he will be like, yes, you should do this, this, that. But in individual dealings, we have to be compassionate. We cannot become like a stone. And that depends on what the others' expectations are. Sometimes, we have to give others what they want, and then they will come our way. So we have to be very, very, compassionate, pray for intelligence, mercy, etc., especially devotees, when we are dealing with other devotees, non-devotees, strangers, etc. And if we don't give them, then their chances of coming to bhakti also reduces, because they'll think, yeah, these devotees are all hard-hearted, because fundamentally, at least there should be some compassion for others' sufferings. They're suffering for want of something, right? We can't just completely just pull them off from their current situation. It's not practical. We can pray for them, we can help them, but we should not be hard-hearted to just, pull them off from where they are. So yeah, these are things very difficult to understand. It took me a few years to understand that we have to be compassionate, at the same time not ignorant about their situation, but still try to help them, but still understand where they stand and what their situation is. And yeah, sometimes some things we might have to give them, which will make them more comfortable and maybe more receptive to devotion as well. Yes, Mataji, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that. Of course, one more point I want to say is that we should not take any of this so much that it affects our own bhakti. We should not get pulled ourselves down by all these things, but at the same time, we should not become like a stone. So we have to create some balance, which is why Grasta life is a challenge. It's a challenge. And yeah, in the interest of preaching, we should be compassionate and take others along. Yeah. Okay. Anybody wants to add anything to that? Okay. Thank you so much all for joining. So we'll close here. Tantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyo cha Patithanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Ananta Koti Vaishnava Samveta Gaura Bhakta ki jai. Hare Krishna. Actually, one more thing, comes to my mind is